Chapter 17. The End. Misaki, a voice said above her. Why was her chest full of knives? Gods, it hurts so much. Misaki. Her eyes blinked open, and she was surprised to see that there were not, in fact, several blades buried in her torso. She was in one piece, the only bleeding from the jagged cuts on her forearms. Setsuko was staring down at her with tears in her eyes. Misaki. Oh, thank Nami you're all right. Before Misaki could react, the other woman had wrapped her in a crushing hug that sent new spikes of pain through her ribs. And Misaki remembered the flash of fan blades, a skinless arm, Leza Linghan sucking the breath from her lungs. What are you doing? Misaki tried to say. Get back. Go back and hide. But when she opened her mouth, only a wheezing groan came out. Yash, Yash, Setsuko soothed, rubbing her back. You're going to be okay. How? Misaki whispered and felt her eyes watering with pain. How could making a single sound hurt so much? How long? How long were you out? Setsuko said. Just a few dinmanu, I think. I just heard all this terrible screaming, and I know you said to stay in the cellar, but I had to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, she babbled, but I had to make sure you were all right. You passed out just as I came into the room. And there's so much blood in here. I didn't know whose it was, and I thought you might be dead, Misaki. What happened? Mutely, Misaki shook her head. Setsuko wasn't supposed to know. She wasn't supposed to know any of this. So, this girl here. Setsuko said, nodding to the partially beheaded, partially skinned mess that had been the fan-wielding Fanyaka. Did you kill her? Squeezing her eyes shut against the pain, Misaki nodded. And all those men in the halls? Was that you too? Setsuko spoke slowly, as though she was almost afraid to know the answer. But there was no point trying to lie, so she nodded again. Great Nami, Misaki. Misaki kept her eyes shut, not wanting to see Setsuko's expression of horror. She waited in agony for her sister-in-law to recoil, push her away. Instead, Setsuko clutched her tighter. I'm so glad you're here. Setsuko's voice broke into a sob. What would we have done? What would we have done without you? That was when Misaki felt it, a vague sense that there was still a living Fanyaka nearby. She gripped Setsuko's shoulders and gritted her teeth, trying to form words. Get back, she managed finally. Setsuko wasn't safe here. I'm sorry, Setsuko said as Misaki's feeling solidified into a certainty. Somewhere in the next room, a Fanyaka was winding up for an attack. I know you said to stay hidden, but when I heard the screams, I just couldn't back. Misaki shoved Setsuko with all the strength left in her body, just as the neighboring wall exploded. The wind sent Misaki tumbling across the wood. She put her hands over her head, hoping that her push had been enough to put Setsuko out of range of the debris biting into her forearms and clattering across the floor around her. Get up! Her mind screamed even as the numbness of shock and impact pulsed through her limbs. Get up and fight. Her body wouldn't do it. Everything hurt so much. All she wanted was to lie down and let this new attacker kill her. Let it end. But her life wasn't the only one in the balance. Because Setsuko was there, perhaps only because Setsuko was there, she planted her hands on the floor and tried to stand. She never did make it to her feet. Instead, a hand seized her loose hair and yanked her upward, wrenching a cry from her damaged lungs. It was the scarred Fanyaka. The blood dripping from his head made Misaki glad she hadn't taken the full impact of the fan-wielder's attack, as he had. The impact had likely left him unconscious for a few Seiranu, but it didn't seem to have weakened him. With what seemed like an effortless swing of his arm, he hurled Misaki across the kitchen. She hit the table where Mamoru and Chulhi had been studying and tumbled across it, shattering teacups and scattering scrolls. When she collapsed onto the tatami on the far side of the table, her whole body seemed to pulse with forming bruises. Her scalp stung, and there was now a screaming pain in her neck to rival that in her lungs. Fighting the stars crowding her vision, she gripped the side of the table and tried to stand, but her body was shaking so badly she couldn't do it. Blinking through the stars, she could just make out the scarred Fanyaka striding toward her. Stop it, a voice shouted, and Misaki turned to see Setsuko brandishing a kitchen knife. Leave her alone. No. Misaki's eyes widened, panic driving her to her feet. Setsuko, don't. Too late. Setsuko had already run at the soldier, raising the knife to stab. The Fanyaka's casual backhand sent her smashing through the kitchen's back door. No! Misaki screamed. No! No! She rushed forward to go to Setsuko? To attack the man? With her mind scrambled from the impact, she wasn't even sure, but the Fanyaka moved faster. He caught her around the throat and slammed her back down on the floor. At this point, Misaki didn't even know if killing this man would make a difference. She would live, yes, but when the next soldiers entered the house, she would be far too weak to fight them off. She was tempted to give up, let him kill her, but he had hit Setsuko, so he was going to die. She didn't resist as he straddled her and put both hands around her neck to strangle her. Instead, she focused her jia into 2 fingers. As he pressed his considerable weight down on her windpipe, he put himself close enough to give her a clear shot through his left eye. Blood needle ready, she drew her hand back and a blade struck the man in the neck. Misaki started. Her immediate thought was that Setsuko had woken up and come to her aid. But when her eyes flicked from Siradenya's glass tip to her hilt, it wasn't Setsuko she found clutching the handle. It was Hiroshi. The 5-year-old was barely big enough to hold the lightweight sword in both hands, but his stance was solid and his gaze fixed. Above Misaki, the Fanyaka's face twisted in a grimace. He was wounded but not dead. Blood squirted grotesquely from the cut in his neck as he straightened up and turned to face his attacker. Hiroshi didn't flinch as the drops spattered his face and chest. Hero, Misaki started, but the Fanyaka put a foot on her chest, slamming her back down so hard her head spun. Still holding Misaki to the floor with his boot, the soldier looked down at Hiroshi, incredulous. Offended almost. Misaki's heart lurched in panic, but there was no fear on Hiroshi's face, no hesitation. He didn't even pause to adjust his grip on the weapon before he slashed again, opening a clean cut from the man's hip to his collarbone. The Fanyaka made a strange noise and reached out as if to grab at Hiroshi. Shoving the boot from her chest, Misaki scrambled to her feet to defend her son. But the man only stumbled and crashed to the floor. His phonia rose for a moment, rushing through the room in a howl of denial, then went still. Hiroshi had killed him. Blood dribbled down his blank face as he turned to face Misaki. "You're safe now, Ka-chan." With something like a sob, Misaki snatched the sword from his hands and flung it away. She grabbed her son by the shoulders roughly, her breathing too quick, near hysteria. Why would you do that? She wanted to scream, to shake him. Why would you do that? But Hiroshi was only 5. He had only done what he had been taught by his teachers, his distant father, and his monster of a mother. They had created a little boy who was ready to give his life to kill his enemies. A true Matsuda. Misaki's head dropped onto Hiroshi's tiny shoulder. The monster crumbled, and she was just a woman, just a mother who had failed her son. "Hiroshi." Her voice broke. "Come here." Gathering the boy into her arms, she held him tight and loved him as hard as she could, and hoped it would be enough to wash everything else away. Hiroshi, as always, was cold. Mamoru. The dragon killer stepped back and cast aside the nameless sword, now red with its owner's blood. Mamoru swayed. Blood drizzled from the stumps of his fingers onto the frozen ground. It was a strange sensation, feeling the liquid that carried his Nyama leaving him to seep out onto the mountain. His vision slid. But it couldn't be over. It just couldn't. If he could just force himself to move, push through it, it would all be all right. He took a step, and another, fell to one knee. His mangled hand hit the snow, and the world snapped into focus. The pain was sharp, but small, unimportant somehow. Suddenly, it wasn't as though he was missing fingers. His fingers were the snow. They were the rivers, reaching all the way down the mountain to sink into the ocean and grasp the power of gods. He wasn't bleeding out. He was the mountain. For the first time in his life, he was perfectly, overwhelmingly whole. He smiled. A decade later, a 15-year-old Hiroshi would become known as the youngest swordsman ever to master the Whispering Blade. What the world would never know, was that he was the second youngest. By the time the Ranganese soldier registered the blood-red flash of ice, it had already passed through his body. The sword was pure Matsuda, half Takayubi snow, half Mamoru's own blood, and it cut through the dragon killer like he was no more than air. Alone on the mountainside, a whispering blade caught the last rays of a dying sun. It gleamed once, pointed skyward, as its first and only victim hit the snow. Then, its work done, the sword fell to mist. The sun sank to the sea. Mamoru didn't feel the Jia ebb from his body, didn't feel himself fall. All he knew was that his cheek lay numb against the icy ground as the last of the red left the sky. I did it, he thought, and the blood spreading from his body seemed unimportant. Tusama, Ka-chan, I did it. He couldn't wait to tell them. If part of him was lucid enough to understand that he was never going to see his parents again, he ignored it. The power that had just filled him was too big not to be remembered. He had touched divinity, held it in his hands. He didn't hear the thunder of approaching planes or the loudspeakers announcing the arrival of reinforcements. As he and the dragon killer had fought, their feet had churned the surrounding snow into waves, like the brine at the beginning of the world. Red from Mamoru's fingers snaked through those waves to mix with the blood slowly seeping from the other man's body. Blood became snow, became blood, became ocean, and Mamoru found his eyes frozen open, staring into the dragon killer's face. It wasn't a frightening face or even a particularly foreign one, pale skin, black eyes, and sharp features, much like Mamoru's own. In a different uniform, the man could have been an upperclassman or a young teacher at Kimono Academy. People always said the Ranganese were demons of a different breed from the Kaigenese, but their blood seemed to be the same color, now that they lay still, letting it run together. They had all come out of the same ocean, hadn't they? At the beginning of the world? The dragon killer didn't look like he had felt any pain. If anything, he looked faintly surprised, his eyes wide and his lips parted. Just a human. Here with Mamoru at the end of the living world. As his body grew warm and numb, Mamoru wondered if this Fanyaka had someone to remember him across the ocean, a father, a mother, someone who would be proud to hear that he had died on the Sword of Kaigen. Chapter 18. The Shelter. Misaki started at the sound of a crash, clutching Hiroshi tighter to her. But the young Fanyaka who appeared in the doorway was already dead, his spine snapped by a single pale hand around his neck. A wave of icy Jia overtook her as Takaru threw the boy's limp body aside and stepped into the room. "You're a mess," he said by way of greeting. "Both of you. Where are Setsuko and the other children?" Setsuko is unconscious," Misaki said, pointing to the next room. Her Jia had quickly confirmed that her sister-in-law's heart was still beating, but she wasn't sure what damage she might have sustained. She hadn't quite gotten herself to move, not wanting to let go of her son. Izumo, Nagisa, and Ayumi are hidden in the cellar. "Well, what are you just sitting there for?" Mamoru, Misaki started desperately. "Where is?" Then a roar tore through the sky outside. "Another tornado?" "No. Planes." Citizens of Takayubi, an amplified voice split the night in Kaijangwa. "In the interest of national security, His Imperial Majesty has ordered an airstrike on the area. You have 10 Sierrana to reach the nearest bomb shelter." Chulhi had done it. Reinforcements were here. "His Imperial Majesty has ordered an airstrike on the area," the voice repeated. "You have 10 Sierrana to reach the nearest bomb shelter." "Well, we have our orders," Takaru said as if the mayor had just instructed him to file a bit of paperwork. "Let's go." "What about the others?" Misaki asked. "Your brother." "What about Mamoru?" "They'll hear the announcement too," Takaru said in the same uninterested tone. "They're fast. They'll meet us at the shelter. Get the rest of the children." Nodding, Misaki got to her feet and ran to the cellar. When she threw the doors open, the 3 smallest children were huddled among the food stores. Ayumi fussed on the floor, still half wrapped in the cloth Setsuko had unslung from her shoulder. Nagisa was curled up at the back of the shelter with Izumo in his lap, his hands over the infant's ears. "Come, Nagakuen," she said, kneeling to comfort little Ayumi. "Bring the baby to me." Takayubi only had the one bomb shelter, further up the mountain by the mayor's office, and they only had 10 Siaranu to reach it. Nagakuen, I'm so sorry. She stroked a hand across Nagasa's bangs before picking up the babies, one in each arm. I'm going to need you to run. You can run on your own, right? Yes, Ka-chan, Nagasa said, his eyes wide with confusion as the planes tore lower outside. Misaki wasn't sure if he really understood or the response was just automatic, but she only had 2 arms. Hirokuen, she said as she emerged from the cellar with Nagasa and the babies, hold your brother's hand and don't let go. Make sure he keeps up. Yes, Ka-chan. Hiroshi slid his blood-smeared hand into Nagasa's and held tight, pulling him after Misaki as she made for the front doors. Misaki led them through the back hallways of the house, avoiding the kitchen and the main hall where most of the butchered bodies lay. Nagasa didn't need to see that. When they stepped out into the Genkan, Takaru was waiting for them, Setsuko's limp form slung across one shoulder as if the hefty woman weighed nothing at all. She'll be fine, Takaru said. Let's go. The desk outside was chaos. Women screamed and scrambled to find others. Children didn't know where to run. Misaki scanned anxiously for Ranganese soldiers, but the only ones she found were already dead, lying motionless in the snow while the scene around them swirled with the chaos they had created. Did you kill all the Ranganese in the village? She asked. Everyone whose feet touched the snow, Takaru replied. Of course. A Matsuda's power flowed through the snow of the mountain. No soldier standing outside in that snow would have escaped Takaru's ice. But that meant that there were almost certainly soldiers he had missed, those who had entered homes to dispose of women and children. Planes roared closer to the mountainside in the dark, the swooping, scraping sound so big it seemed to exist in multiple dimensions. Nagasa stared, wide-eyed, up at the jets as Hiroshi pulled him along. Birds, he asked in excited curiosity, seemingly oblivious to the pandemonium of adults around him. Planes, Hiroshi corrected. The Emperor sent his pilots. Why? Hiroshi's answer was simple but accurate, to kill. You too. Takaru called to 2 Mizumaki women, a mother and daughter, nearby. My wife is injured. Help her carry her children to the shelter. What? Misaki started to resist as the women moved to obey. What are you talking about? Don't listen to anything she says, he told the Mizumakis without looking at her. She has a concussion. What? Misaki realized that he was probably right, but it was hard to say if he could tell or if he was just using it as an excuse to ignore her words. As the women took Izumo and Ayumi from her, a figure approached, notable because he was moving in the wrong direction, down the mountain instead of up toward the bomb shelter. Takaru recognized him before she did. Kwang Chulhi, he said. The northern boy still had the wakizashi Takashi had given him tied at his hip, but he didn't appear to have met with any Ranganese. Other than being out of breath, he seemed unhurt. Matsuda Dano, he panted. Are all of you all right? We're fine, Takaru said. Well done contacting reinforcements, by the way. You have our thanks. My father took a census from the mayor's office, and he's been checking people in as they reach the shelter, Chulhi said. I came to look for the families we're still missing. He looked down at his infocom device, the display illuminating his face in the growing dark, and tapped at the screen. Now that all of you are on your way up, I can check off your family, except. He looked up at their small party again. A pained expression crossed his face. Where's Ma? Who else are we missing? Takaru demanded, starting up the slope toward the bomb shelter. Other than warriors? Half of the Mizumaki family is unaccounted for, Chulhi said. We're missing all but one of the Katakuris, and no one has seen a single member of the Yukino family. What? Misaki stopped in her tracks. Are you sure? Sorry, Chulhi said. No one has seen Yukino Hairi or her son. No. Misaki put a hand to her hip, only to have her fingers brush the lip on an empty sheath. She had left Suradenya in the house. Weaponless, she turned imploringly to her husband, still armed with Kyojutsu. We have to go back. We have to find her. My brother ordered me to get you, Setsuko, and the children to safety. Come now. We have to move. She's our friend. How can you? These are my orders, he said, and I have given you yours. Misaki clenched her jaw. Yes, sir. Then she swayed, putting a hand to her head. Sorry, I feel dizzy. Kwang-san, could I have your arm? Of course, Chulhi said and rushed to support her. Takaru must have noticed her eyes flicking to the wakizashi at Chulhi's hip. He stepped forward to stop her. Knowing she was not physically fast enough to outmaneuver him, Misaki spun. Instead of going straight for the weapon, she turned her body into Chulhi's in a move that put the young man between herself and her husband. Wait, what? The northern voice stuttered in surprise. As Takaru's hand closed on Chulhi's shoulder instead of hers, Misaki seized the handle of the wakizashi. Then she shoved off Chulhi's body, simultaneously throwing him backward into Takaru and propelling herself forward. The wakizashi slid from its sheath and she was sprinting, weapon in hand, toward the Yukino compound. She didn't look back to see if Takaru was following her. He could either leave Setsuko with Chulhi, hoping the boy would be able to get her safely to the shelter, or he could try to pursue Misaki while carrying their sister-in-law. Either way, the Yukino compound was close enough that he wouldn't catch up to her before she got there. The double doors at the front of the house hung open, knocked from their hinges by the same blunt force phonia that had breached the Matsuda compound. Not far from the entrance, Misaki found a tiny body in a light gray kimono. Ryota. The 4-year-old lay face down on the Jenkin step. Blood had seeped from his back to stain the Yukino snowflake insignia, but Misaki could feel that the blood in his veins had stilled. She looked away quickly, knowing there was nothing she could do for the sweet little boy. Sorry, Ryota-kun, she murmured and tried not to think about his bright-eyed smile or his infectious giggle as she pressed on. She had to find Hayari. The first thing Misaki saw of the Ranganese soldier was his back. He was on top of Hayari, straddling her. Her kimono was torn open, exposing her pale legs. Misaki was on him before he could turn. Takashi's spare wakizashi might not have been as light or sharp as Saradenia, but Misaki's slice was clean, cleaving through muscle, windpipe, and spinal cord in one strike. At this point, Misaki was becoming familiar with the wind off a dying fanyaka, a haunting but harmless breeze from the weaker soldiers, and an outright howl from the black-clad elites. None of that prepared her for the power that burst from this man the moment she cut through his neck. The wind flung its host's blood in all directions, shattered a few nearby vases, and threw Misaki to the floor, reawakening the stabbing pain in her chest. She struggled to her hands and knees amid porcelain shards as the last of the man's phonia roared through the rest of the house, making the walls creak. With a horrified sound between a shriek and a sob, a blood-splattered Hayari kicked, trying to drag herself out from underneath the headless body. Sorry, Misaki exclaimed and scrambled forward to haul the corpse off her friend. I'm sorry, Hayari-chan. That was messier than I anticipated. Hayari was bloody, her face streaked with tears, but Misaki flooded with relief to feel that her friend's Nyama was still strong. Most of the blood on her had come from her attacker. Sobbing, Hayari tried to rearrange her kimono to cover herself, but her hands were shaking so badly that she couldn't do it. Hayari, I'm so sorry, Misaki said, touching the other woman's shoulder. I'm sorry I didn't get here sooner. Considering the power of the soldier's dying phonia, it was unlikely Misaki would have been able to kill him without the element of surprise, but she should have tried. Or someone should have tried. Somehow. This should never have happened. Pulling water from the air, Misaki swept it down her friend's body, clearing away the blood and everything else the Ranganese soldier had left on her. Then she tried to close up Hayari's kimono for her, but the garment was so ripped, it didn't cover her breasts, bruised where fingers had clawed at them. Misaki clenched her teeth. Until now, she had not felt true hatred for the Ranganese, but suddenly, she wished she hadn't killed the man so quickly. Wistfully, she thought of all the things she could have done to him before he died, how many times she could have stabbed him, how many pieces she could have cut off, but no amount of violence would heal Hayari. Despite her rage, Misaki forced her voice to be soft as she rubbed her friend's arms. It's all right, Hayari-chan. He's dead now. He's gone. It's going to be all right. No, it's not. It's not. Fresh tears spilled from Hayari's eyes and rolled down her cheeks. He killed my son. My son. My baby boy. Part of what had always made Hyori so beautiful was her simplicity. Those soft eyes were as clear as spring melt, concealing nothing. In love, in joy, in mirth, she was pure. Her pain was the same. Undiluted. And it was unbearable to look at. Misaki ruthlessly forced back her own tears. They weren't out of danger. You're still alive, Misaki insisted. You're going to survive this. I don't want to. Hyori's voice was broken. I don't want to. I'm so sorry, Hyori-chan. Misaki tucked a strand of the woman's hair behind her ear. I know this isn't going to be easy, but I need you to stand up. There would be time to come undone after everyone was safe. Pulling off her own coat, Misaki wrapped it around her friend, tying it close to cover what the ruined kimono couldn't. Yash, Hyori-chan. Misaki pulled Hyori's arm, doing her best to be gentle in her urgency. There's a good girl. Stand up. I can't. Hyori was shaking her head. It hurts. You have to. Bombs are going to start raining on this mountain any Sierra now. I don't care. Just leave me. I can't do that, Misaki said. What will I say to Daisan when he gets back? He won't want me, Hyori sobbed into her hands. I'm disgraced. I'm ruined. Ignoring her friend's protests, Misaki draped Hyori's arm across her shoulders and stood, pulling the other woman up with her. Hyori let out a pitiful cry of pain, her legs buckling beneath her. Please. Misaki, just leave me. Let me be with my son. No, Misaki said through gritted teeth. No. You're not going to die here. Neither of us are. By the time Misaki got Hyori to the broken doors of the Yukino compound, the woman had fainted. Takaru was waiting there, still holding an unconscious Setsuko. We don't have time for this, he said. Shifting Setsuko onto one shoulder, he reached out to pick up Hyori. No. Misaki bent over and hoisted Hyori's limp form on her own shoulders. I've got her. Just run. Misaki. An ear-splitting explosion shook the ground, and Misaki's stomach dropped. The airstrike had started. She ran. Hyori was considerably taller than Misaki, but Robin Thundiel, Eileen Eldon, and several other people would be dead if Misaki couldn't make good time carrying a person bigger than herself to safety. Takaru was running too. And even if there had been time for them to argue, they would hardly have been able to hear each other. Bombs rocked the lower slopes like thunder, shaking the ground beneath Misaki's feet. In the distance, men cried out. She could only hope that the screams belonged to Ranganese and not villagers unable to reach the shelter. Amid the deafening noise and darkness, there was no way to tell. Ahead of her, Takaru skidded to a stop in the snow. Misaki nearly stumbled into him before she saw why he had stopped. A skinny figure stood in the dark before him, Atsushi, the swordsmith's son. And Matsuda Dono. The boy yelped. He had an ashen look on his face, as if he had just witnessed sights that struck the soul from his body. Atsushi, Takaru said. Where is your family? The little smith's lip trembled. And my father. He pointed toward the southern pass. One of the bombs hit him. His leg is gone. He told me to run. I couldn't help him. He's still on the path and I'm not strong enough to carry him. Please, Matsuda Dono. You have to go back. You have to save him. Takaru stared at the Numu boy for a moment. Then he scooped him up around the waist and kept running. Wait. Matsuda Dono, no. Tears streamed down Atsushi's face as he struggled, kicking ineffectually at Takaru. Please. Please. This is unseemly, boy, Takaru said coldly. Don't make me knock you unconscious. With a last sob of despair, Atsushi stopped fighting and clung to Takaru, burying his face in his lord's kimono, as if there was a drop of comfort to be found there. Atsushi's cries hurt Misaki's heart, but she couldn't fault her husband for this particular decision. Her detour to save Hyori had already put their lives in danger. Heading back down to the southern pass in the middle of a dusk airstrike would mean almost certain death. Even to save Takayubi's greatest swordsmith, it wasn't worth it. The shelter was in sight, only a few bounds ahead, when the sound of a low-swooping jet split the air. Deafened by the sound, Misaki stumbled from the force of the wind. Then a bomb hit, mere bounds from her. Had she been unburdened, she might have kept her footing, but with the wind and Hyri's dead weight throwing her off balance, she fell. Pilots had good eyesight, but the sun was gone. And in the dark, Fonukala were indistinguishable from Jajakalu. Misaki rolled over onto her hands and knees. Unable to find the strength to stand, she crawled toward Hyri. The other woman groaned, mournful eyes blinking open as Misaki gripped her arm. Through the ringing in her ears, Misaki could hear her whimpering. Why? Why are they firing on us? Because we don't matter, Misaki thought numbly. The only thing the Empire cares about is stopping the Ranganese here. It doesn't matter how many of us get caught in the crossfire. Before Misaki could pull Hyri up, she felt Takeru's Jia rising around them. The snow beneath her turned to a plain of ice as smooth as the surface of a frozen lake. Most Jajakalu couldn't create ice formations strong enough to lift multiple people, but Takeru was not most Jajakalu. He lifted his hand and the smooth ice tilted, sending everyone on it sliding toward the shelter entrance. A shower of bullets shattered the ice where Hyri had just been, but the formation itself held. A moment later, Misaki, Hyri, Atsushi, and an unconscious Setsuko tumbled to the bunker's Jonjo glass floor. The hands of the other villagers immediately grabbed them, pulling them the rest of the way in. Ka-chan, a relieved voice said, and Misaki found Nagisa clinging to her arm. Atsushi, Chulhi said, helping the battered young smith to his feet. Are you okay, Numyuden? Where's your family? Atsushi shook his head. His sob became one of many filling the small bunker. As Misaki got to her feet, Takeru slid into the shelter on his own ice, a hail of bullets following him almost to the threshold. He managed a smoother landing than the rest of them, even as gunfire sent up a spray of cutting ice shards all around him. Back, he ordered the rest of the villagers, outstretched hands stopping the ice shards before they could shoot into the bunker. What about your son, Matsuda? Chulhi looked from Takeru to Misaki. Where's Mamoru? He's not here. Misaki scanned the huddle of people in the dark confines of the shelter and didn't see him. By her quick count, there were no more than 35, most of them women and children. Surely there had to be more survivors than that. But when she turned back toward the town, no one was following them up the mountain. Matsuda Mamoru is still missing, Chulhi's father, Kwang Taemin said. Along with his uncle, Yukino Dai, and almost all the men. What? Hyri said weakly. Takeru grabbed hold of the heavy shelter door, ready to slide it shut. Wait. Hyri clutched at Takeru's sleeve. Matsuda Dano, my husband is still out there. Takeru ignored her and started to close the door. Wait, Misaki insisted in a stronger voice. Hyri's right. What about all the fighters? What about Mamoru? Where is Mamoru? Takeru didn't look at her. No one else is coming, he said in a flat voice. Misaki felt the whole world gray. The maddened energy that had kept her moving stilled. What? When I left the line, my brother and son were the only fighters left alive. There were still over 100 Ranganese advancing on their position. No one else is coming. All the strength went out of Misaki's limbs. No. Hyri's voice started as a low methodical moan that rose in pitch until it was a shriek. No, that can't be right. That can't be right. You should be proud, Yukino-san. Takeru looked down at the wrecked woman. He died with his sword in his hand. Hyri screamed. That night in the bunker was as close to hell as any night in the realm of the Duna. The darkness stank of blood and vomit. Hyri screamed for her son and husband. Amino Samusa's wife insisted that her daughter had been awake when she brought her to the bunker, even as those around her tried to tell her that the girl's skull was shattered. One of the Aikino elders died right there in the crowded darkness, while her daughters-in-law tried to patch her injuries with the meager medical supplies in the shelter. Through the noise, Misaki was dimly aware of Izumo wailing in her lap, but she couldn't seem to lift her arms to hold him. It was only now that she was coming down from her fighter's high that she understood what had kept her body moving through this whole ordeal, through injuries that should have put her out of commission. It was more than adrenaline. There had been a hope, however ridiculous, that they would all make it through this alive. That hope had started to die in the Yukino compound when she saw little Ryota's body. The clunk of the closing door had fallen like a sword, killing it entirely. The shelter was sealed and Mamoru was not there. Mamoru was not coming. After being held back so long, exhaustion rushed over her with a vengeance, weakening her to the point of paralysis. Grudgingly, she realized that Takaru had been right about the concussion. Her head pulsed. Shapes that should have been clear blurred in the dim light. Even her Jajaka senses, which never failed her, started slipping away. The human heartbeats that were usually so distinct in the dark, warped and mashed together with the pain in her own pulsing head and chest. Tears, saliva, blood, sweat, and stomach acid became indistinguishable as they moved through people's bodies and oozed out of them. Ka-chan. Nagasa's terrified voice at her shoulder was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality, a thin thread preventing her from falling into the formless chaos. Ka-chan, what's happening? The toddler tugged on her sleeve, trying to pull his mother back to him. What's happening? She couldn't make her voice work to answer him. She couldn't even lift a hand to offer him comfort. Not when skin disappeared and Misaki couldn't even tell what liquid was moving inside all the bodies and what was spilling out. Ka-chan, baby crying. Nagasa's little voice broke. Baby crying. When he couldn't get his mother to respond, Nagasa cried too. Eventually, the sobs and screams and moans of pain all coalesced into a sticky sea of sound, varying only when the boom of bombs too close to the shelter caused it to swell. The sea consumed Misaki. Fire and acid seemed to leach into her lungs, reawakening the stabbing in her chest. The pain immobilized her like a spear through the torso, pinning her back against the bunker wall. She needed someone to speak to her, a calm voice to ground her in reality before everything merged into this soup of blood and sound. But Setsuko was still unconscious. Hayuri had crumpled to the floor, seemingly too deep in her own agony to register anything around her, and Takaru, of course, didn't even turn to look at his wife. He stood with his back to the other villagers, facing the bunker door, an immovable stone figure in the dark. Misaki had the strange feeling then that he was the key. If she could reach out and grab onto him, he might stabilize her. His rigid form was the only thing that seemed to be motionless in the writhing, weeping crawl of human flesh. But he was as distant as he was still, and Misaki knew from years of experience that reaching out and calling to him wouldn't make a difference. He was untouchable. She was alone, drowning in screams. Chapter 19. The Lantern. The fire in Robin's hand guttered as a roll of thunder graced them with another shower of rain. He made a dissatisfied noise in his throat. We might have to switch to that thing soon, he said, nodding to the unlit Kairi lantern swinging from Misaki's fingers. If it rains harder, I won't make a good light. You've been a fine light, Robin. We're already there. Misaki pointed to the small light ahead, the street lamp that marked Ishihama's only bus stop. Your father predicted this, Robin said, staring up at the evening sky, now nearly black with clouds. Right down to the volume of the thunder and the size of the raindrops. He does that. How? If I knew that, I'd have applied for a job in weather forecasting instead of emergency medical treatment. I should have asked him to teach me, Robin mused as they reached the bus stop, marked only by a wooden sign affixed to the lamppost. I don't know how that would have gone. Because I'm a Tajaka? No. I think it's a matter of experience. He was born in the Arashiki, you know. The more storms you experience, the more you pick up on the signs. The rain fell harder and Robin's flame finally went out, leaving only the light of the bus stop's solitary street lamp. Sorry about this, Misaki laughed. She extended an open hand above Robin's head, no easy feat, as the Tajaka was several koina taller than she was, diverting the raindrops around him. We really should have tried to come up with an umbrella for you. Hindsight. He shrugged, seemingly not at all bothered as the ocean wind blew rain through Misaki's guard to spray his neck and face. They were quiet for a moment. Misaki stood close in order to shield him from the rain, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body through his black coat. She sighed, melting into the warmth, trying to let herself savor it, just in case this was the last time. But no. She wouldn't think about that. Robin couldn't know she was thinking that. If she was going to do this right, he had to go on ahead. So, he said, and she blinked up at him, coming out of her darkening thoughts. Did I do all right? Or were they just pretending to like me? Pretending? Robin, no. They loved you, Kazu especially. He smacked me around a lot for someone who likes me, Robin said, rubbing a bruise on his chin where Kazu's fist had clipped him in a hand-to-hand bout. You accepted the invitation to training, she pointed out. Anyway, he's a 16-year-old Susanoo. That's how he shows affection. I'd be more worried if he hadn't bruised you a bit. All right then, Robin laughed. I'll take your word for it and be flattered. Thank you for not burning him, she said, and for giving him a few wins. That was gracious of you. Giving him? Robin repeated. He fought well. Misaki just raised an eyebrow at her friend in a knowing expression. Robin sighed. He was trying so hard, he said, and Misaki rolled her eyes. Gods, you're soft, Thundiel. Susanoos were masterful with the sword, but hand-to-hand combat was Robin's domain. Kazu had been far out of his depth challenging their foreign guest to an empty-handed match. While Robin was not one to back down from a challenge, he was also not the sort of person who reveled in humiliating a younger fighter who was doing his best. Where Misaki was used to simply thrashing Kazu and walking out with an imperious toss of her hair, Robin had let the boy have his pride. Besides, Robin added after a moment, I thought the idea here was to get your parents to like me. I thought throwing their hair all over the dojo was maybe not a good way to do that. Oh, Robin, Misaki laughed a sigh. You really don't understand Shirajima culture. Being the strongest is a good thing. That's why all these powerhouse Shirajima families are always intermarrying. I would say letting Kazu get a few hits in was a mistake, except that my father knows a throne fight when he sees one. He was sufficiently impressed. She hoped. Power, Robin said. That's really the thing people use to decide who they marry? Misaki nodded. This whole betrothal business. She had avoided bringing it up this whole time. She didn't know why she brought it up now. My parents scoured the region for the most powerful house that would take me. And did you land a good house? Robin asked casually, but Misaki could sense the tension in his voice. Who do you think you're talking to? Of course I did, Misaki said, equally tense, though she tried to pass it off as indignation. Matsuda, House of the Whispering Blade. Langana, Misaki, not bad. Robin was still trying a little too hard to sound casual. He shook his head. It just all seems so old-fashioned. The observation made Misaki laugh in earnest. You're just now noticing that we're old-fashioned? Did you not notice how we light our house? She jiggled the Kyuri lantern in her left hand. Her right was still guarding Robin from the rain, or the fact that my father kept calling you son of Kree, a title that had been used centuries ago to address to Jackaloo of unknown parentage. We keep to the old warrior traditions the rest of the world has forgotten, and we're proud of it. The rain thickened from a patter to a deluge, and Robin caught her hand, letting the water pour down on him. Creatures of fire usually wilted and shivered in the rain, but Robin Thundiel never seemed to fit in with the rest of his kind. His Disenka skin, so much darker than Misaki's, but lighter than a Yamenka's, had a luminous quality to it, like the aura of a Litigei but warmer. He glowed in the downpour. Raindrops evaporated as they fell on him, hissing softly. The mist they created caught the fiery light of his skin, cloaking him in flame-like vapors. I don't want to leave without you, he said. Misaki looked at him through the rain and saw an unfamiliar emotion in those coal-black eyes. Robin Thundiel, Firebird, the crime fighter who made hardened criminals quake at his shadow, was afraid. I'll be right behind you. She squeezed his arm. Just like we planned. 1 week, Robin said firmly. You'll be back in Kertha in 1 week? Yes. If everything really does go to plan. I will. If this didn't go to plan, well, Misaki couldn't think about that now. If she let her mind wander in that direction, she would never be able to let go of Robin's sleeve. Right. Robin was nodding, seemingly more to himself than Misaki. You're smarter about this stuff than I am. I trust you. Stupid boy, a voice in her head scoffed, but it was drowned out by a part of her that hoped to all the gods that Robin was not being stupid, that his trust was not misplaced. Still caught in her thoughts, she didn't notice Robin leaning in until his lips met hers. She stiffened with a small noise of surprise. The water that had managed to seep into Robin's clothes, heated by Taya, hissed to steam when it touched Misaki's cold skin. Instead of recoiling from the threat of frostbite like a sane Tajaka, Robin sank into it, drinking the cold like a parched man at a half-frozen river. Misaki melted. Kissing was one of those bizarre Corinthian practices that had first repulsed Misaki and later seduced her. Apparently, the romantic custom had been introduced to carry by the white slaves imported from Hades during the height of Yamenka colonialism. Most Tajakalu did not kiss, but Misaki remembered thinking the first time Robin's lips met hers that she had never been happier that this particular Tajaka had grown up in a barbaric white slum. Wound up in his heat, she had to wonder what appeal this held for the white Adens with no Gia or Taya. Where was the magic in something that didn't seethe between extremes? Where was the excitement in a kiss that didn't spark and steam and burn like this? Robin held her there, wound in tendrils of steam, before breaking the kiss. "Sorry," he said as Misaki raised a hand to tingling lips, doing her best to look affronted rather than melted. "I just had to, just in case. I'm sorry. I'm just nervous." "Why?" Misaki laughed to cover the fact that she was just as anxious, if not more so. "You did your part. You were wonderful. What if it wasn't enough?" Robin asked. "What if they say no?" "They won't. But if they do?" Misaki shrugged. "Then the answer is no. It just seems weird to me that you would let someone else have the final say on who you spend the rest of your life with." "Not just anyone else," Misaki said. "They're my parents. They know me better than anyone, and I trust their judgment. That's how I knew they would like you." She smiled. "If you say so." "I guess I'll have to defer to your expertise," Robin laughed. "I don't have much experience with family stuff." Robin had lost both his parents and all his siblings except his twin brother, Rakesh, in the border skirmishes between Ranga and Dissa when he was only 5. A loss like that was enough to shatter a child beyond repair, but somehow Robin had put those pieces back together into a broad smile and a heart open to everyone. A voice for the silenced, a shelter for the defenseless, a pair of fists for the powerless. It happened against Misaki's better judgment. She tipped onto her toes as if falling upward and caught Robin's mouth in another kiss. The lantern slipped from her fingers and splashed to the ground, forgotten, as her hands tangled in Robin's hair. Coarser than Kaigenese hair, straighter than Yamenka curls, an anomaly, like everything about him. Her fighter who preserved life. Her Theonite who kissed like an Aden. Her Tajaka who drank the cold like it could sustain him. They broke apart just as the bus came rattling up the path, headlights glowing in the rain. Cheeks flushed, they scrambled to stand an appropriate distance apart as the headlights brushed over their dispersing steam and the bus squeaked to a halt. The driver stepped out, squinting to see the teenagers through the driving rain. "Two?" he asked in Shirajima dialect, rounded with a full Ishihama accent. "No." Misaki shook her head, indicating Robin. "Just the one. He doesn't speak Kaijangwa or dialect, so please make sure he doesn't miss his stop." Shirajima Grand Station. "Of course, Oju-sama." The driver spoke respectfully, noting the Tsusano crest on Misaki's yukata. "He'll be taken care of." "Any big bags?" he asked, gesturing toward the luggage compartment under the passenger seating. "No," Misaki said as Robin picked up his single waterproof bag and slung it over his shoulder. While the Thundiel twins had recently come into a ridiculous amount of money, Robin's habits had not yet adjusted for it. He still packed like a boy who had grown up in an orphanage. "Well," Robin straightened out his thoroughly sodden coat. "Goodbye, Oju-sama." He bowed at the waist and put his first 2 knuckles to his lips in a charmingly strange combination of a Yamenka parting and the Kaigenese one he had just learned. Wait." Misaki snatched the lantern from the puddle where she had dropped it. "Wait, Robin." She dried the lantern with a quick pull of her Gia and held it out. "Before you go." "Oh." Robin smiled. "Of course." Putting his hand into the lantern, he struck a flame at his fingertip. Steam hissed, and he ignited the little wick inside. The lantern illuminated Robin as he boarded the bus and gave her one last smile. The doors closed and the vehicle rolled away, gravel crunching beneath its tires. It was a long way back to the Arashiki, but Misaki's lantern stayed alight the whole way, even as the rain persisted. The kisses lingered, tingling on Misaki's lips, along with her promise, "I'll be right behind you." As she came out of the trees near the cliff's edge and picked her way down the rain-slick staircase carved out of the rock face, more lantern flames winked in return, illuminating the windows of the mighty storm fort. Most of the region used electricity to light their houses these days, but the storms that battered the Arashiki made electricity unreliable. They still used portable Kairi lanterns for light. The stairs down to the Arashiki had a sturdy railing running alongside them to keep the Tsusanos and their visitors from plummeting to the ocean below. Misaki no longer worried about falling as she had when she was a child. She no longer formed the thin layer of clinging ice beneath her tabi to keep each step anchored to the stone in the wind. Things like rocks and heights had ceased to frighten her. Somewhere in the past 4 years, her fears had grown bigger and less physical. "Ah, Misaki." Tusama gave her a broad smile as she came in. "Did your friend make it to the bus all right?" "Yes." Misaki's hair and yukata were soaked, but a quick wave of her hands turned the water to vapor. "For his sake, I hope you got there before the rain." "No, but he'll live." "It does rain, on occasion, in Karida. He just isn't used to the amount we get here." Robin had spent a week at the Arashiki. Several people had commented that it seemed silly for someone to cross the world only to stay such a short time, but there was only so long Robin could stay away from his city without things starting to fall apart. In the few days he had stayed in the Tsusano's home, he had managed to make friends with everyone, despite the language barrier. That was what Robin did. He had done his part to make this work. Now Misaki just had to do hers. She took a breath, sick with nervousness. "Is something wrong, Misaki? Now that he's gone, I need to talk to you, Tusama." She had planned to wait until the next day. It was late now and her father would want to sleep soon, but she couldn't wait. She wouldn't be able to rest if she had to lie down with the question still squirming through her mind. "The storm is just beginning," he said. "We should talk further inside." Misaki followed her father into one of the Arashiki's interior sitting rooms, so deep that it was essentially a finished cave, carved into the cliffside. Even here, the sheets of rain were still loud against the Arashiki's walls, mixing with the sound of waves on the rocks below. Misaki knelt opposite her father, setting the lantern between them. "Now, Misaki," Tusama said gently. "What is it, child?" "Tusama. I don't want to disrespect you." "You haven't, Misaki." His tone was light, humorous. "Are you planning to?" "It's just. I know you went to a lot of trouble to secure my betrothal to Matsuda Takaru. I don't want you to think I don't appreciate that. I do. But I just..." Nagi's sky. Why was she stammering so much? She took a breath to collect her words. "I know Robin told you. I had him tell you that he was here as part of a research project. That's not why you brought him here." Tusama had probably seen through the lie the moment she told it. He could read people as he read weather patterns, like no one else. "I'm sorry for lying, Tusama." She bowed her head. "I needed you to meet him, so you would understand what I'm about to ask you." "Well, Flower, you've got me curious now." "Spit it out." I don't want to marry Matsuda Takaru." She said it all in one breath, her eyes closed. "I want to follow Robin back to Karida." She opened her eyes and found Tusama's expression unreadable in the wavering lantern light. "He's agreed to marry me," she added hastily, feeling lightheaded, as if there wasn't enough breath in her chest for all the words she needed to make her father understand, "since I know Ka-sen really wants me to marry young. And you're concerned about my future being secure. You saw what a good fighter he is. He's just inherited more than enough money to support a family, and I would still be marrying according to my station, technically, above my station, since the Thundeals are honorary manga Kuronu in their homeland. Of course, you're my father. I wouldn't without your permission." She looked to Tusama, anxious, aching. Her fists were clenched so tightly that her nails were driving crescent moons into her palms. "Oh, Misaki, he is a good boy." Tusama's voice sounded sincere, so why did he seem so deeply sad? "So," she said when she could bear the silence no longer. "Your answer?" "No." Misaki fought back the surge of anger, of grief, that rose in her chest. She had expected the answer. She had known there was only a slim chance. She couldn't be angry at her father. She could only be angry at herself for hoping, for letting Robin hope. When the Thundiel twins had found out about their inheritance, Misaki had seen a chance. Robin was a good fighter, the son of a good family, heir to a good fortune. Suddenly, he had met all the qualifications for marriage to the daughter of a great house. There had been a chance. Misaki, Tusama said, and even through the irrational anger, she couldn't bear to hear him sound so sad. I'm sore, please, Misaki said in a small, strained voice that seemed too fragile to belong to her. Don't apologize, Tusama. I understand. She really did. Robin was Dasenka. His people had inherited their powers by mixing with their Yamenka conquerors, meaning his blood was impure. Misaki had of course seen enough to know that bloodline purity didn't have nearly as much bearing on a person's ability as people here thought, but she hardly expected her own experience to change deep-seated Kaigenese notions of propriety. If Misaki were to marry Robin, their children would be even more mixed, and thereby worse off by traditional standards. Fire and water might balance each other, but they didn't mix well when it came to offspring. She knew that. Why had she done this? How could she have even entertained the thought that her parents would allow her to marry a foreigner? Why had she thought this would work? Why had she thought meeting Robin would change her father's mind? So, she tried to breathe normally. You're going to force me to marry the Matsuda? No, Misaki. I have no illusion that I can force you to do anything you don't want to do. You're a Tsusano, tameable as a storm, but I order you to marry Matsuda Takeru. His meaning was clear. She could abandon her betrothal. She could go to Karitha with Robin, but she would do so in defiance of her father. The realization twisted like physical pain in her chest. Why? Gods, why would he do this to her? Misaki. Tusama's voice was not stern or cruel. In his quiet way, he sounded like he was in as much pain as she was. I don't do this to hurt you. But why? Misaki couldn't stop the tears from running down her cheeks. Is this just because Robin's not a Jajaka? Because his powers aren't genetically compatible with mine? Why should that matter? I'm a girl. I wasn't going to continue the Tsusano line anyway. That doesn't matter to me, Tusama said resolutely. He could be another Jajaka, or he could be an add-in with no power and no family name. My answer would be the same. I don't understand. If it's not about blood, then what is it? What's wrong with him? Nothing, sweet girl. Nothing. I didn't need to meet him in person to know that. I may not have been a perfect father to you, but Nagi knows I didn't raise an idiot. You would never attach yourself to anything less than brilliance, and he is that. Brilliant and driven and kind. He sighed, but you must not follow him down the path he walks. You certainly cannot be allowed to marry him. Why? That boy, the man he is going to become, would lead you into danger and, inevitably, to tragedy. I haven't pressed you about the violent business you've gotten yourself into at Daybreak Academy, but he is the source of it, isn't he? Misaki couldn't deny the observation, but neither could she voice the deeper problem. I'm attracted to danger. Yes, Tusama, she said quietly. I understand, Tusama said, that this is part of the allure. Don't think I can't recognize that. When I was your age, training to wield the Riptide, I wished for another war. You what? Misaki said in surprise. Tusama had always been something of a pacifist, as forgiving as he was strong. Wishing for a war didn't sound like him at all. I was raised on the glorious stories of the Kaliba and the days before it, when our people sank ships and battled invaders. As I trained, I thirsted for a chance to flex my skill in battle like the heroes from our legends. I dreamed of the Ranganese or some as yet unknown enemy sailing against our storm fort, just so I could slake that thirst. Then one day, the thirst disappeared. Do you know what day that was? Misaki shook her head. It was the day you were born, Misaki. Since I started building something better and more beautiful than a fighter's glory, the idea of war has made me sick. The idea that my little girl might suffer, or that my boys would be forced to go to war. That's not something a loving parent wants to contemplate, even the most hardened warrior. Now that I'm an old man, far past my fighting prime, I consider it a great blessing that I have never had to unsheath my sword in a real battle. I would not see you or your brothers in danger for all the glory in the world." "I understand, Tusama," Misaki said, the tears still wet on her cheeks. At the very least, she understood the logic of it. But what does that have to do with a life of dangerous adventures? Might seem worth it now, when you are young and seemingly invincible, but one day, you will have children, and you will not want that life for them. Robin wouldn't endanger his children, she protested. The work he does is all about saving children. He would never put his own at risk. Not on purpose, I'm sure. But men like that one, evil follows them everywhere. He is a good boy, Tusama said again, but he is a gamble, and I can't gamble my daughter's life. You'll understand when you have children of your own. Misaki ducked her head to conceal the pain on her face. She had lost the argument. Had she expected anything else? Her father was wiser and more methodical than anyone she knew. He thought through everything. How could she have expected to overcome that with nothing but a full heart and her tears? Matsuda Takeru has all the capabilities of a warrior, but he also has the good sense to give you and your future children a stable, peaceful life, Tusama said. He is not the sort of person who will seek out trouble and bring it down on you. He will keep you safe. Tusama seemed to sense the agony in his daughter and to understand, resigned, that there was nothing he could say to ease the pain. "I will let you be," he said, and left the room as the storm rose to a howl. The light in the lantern flickered out. A month later, Misaki was married to Takeru, second son of the Matsuda house, master of the Whispering Blade. Takayubi was eerily quiet. She ached for the Arashiki's crashing waves or Livingston's constant traffic, anything to stave off the silence pressing around her. Perhaps it was thanks to that silence that a footstep on the front deck immediately drew her attention. She went and opened the door, expecting to find another neighbor with another belated wedding gift. She was unprepared to find the glow and smoky scent she had been trying so hard to forget. Robin. Her heart jumped with too many emotions, shock, horror, and something that should not have been there at all. Hope? That wasn't right. That didn't make any sense. Misaki. His face split into a smile of relief. So, that does say Matsuda. He glanced from a note in his hand to the stone sign above the compound doors. What are you doing here? I had to see you. So, you came to my husband's house? All the way from Kerida? Are you insane? Even with Robin's newfound fortune, it was an expensive trip, one he appeared to have made alone. I had to make sure you were okay, and help you get away if you weren't. Help me get away? Misaki meant it to sound indignant, but it came out too high, breathless, helpless. Robin, I married Matsuda Takeru. This is my home now. I can't leave. Of course you can, Robin said, his eyes alight with that ferocious determination that had first drawn Misaki to him. You're no one's prisoner. You're Sirawo, the shadow. You can go anywhere. He reached out to take her arm, but she snatched it back. Don't touch me. You can't, I mean. Robin, I'm married. I know. I tried to get in contact with you as soon as I heard. Misaki, why? His voice broke and she looked away, unable to meet his eyes. How did this happen? It doesn't matter, she said toward her feet. It happened. It's done now. No. Robin was shaking his head. I don't accept that. You can't just give up. Who said anything about giving up? I made a decision. Why didn't you tell me? For the first time, the hurt leached into Robin's voice. You just disappeared. Why? Hope and denial tangled in Misaki, grappling as she tried to find words. But there were none. There was no way she could explain. You need to leave, she said stiffly. No. Misaki, I won't. I can't. I'm fine here, Robin, she lied. You need to go now. I promise, everything is okay. That's what you said last time. He sounded so betrayed. I shouldn't have left you then, and I won't do it again. Of course, a simple, you need to leave wouldn't be good enough for Robin. If she wanted him to walk away, she had to wound him, make herself the enemy. That way he could steel himself against her and overcome. Robin could always overcome an enemy. He had just never been good with guilt. She had always been more eloquent and ruthless than her friend. For years, she had used that to support him, filling in the gaps his temperament left in his work. Now she would use it to hurt him. I said I would talk to my parents. I never made any promises to decide on you, or to tell you when the decision was made. That's ridiculous. I humored you, Thundiel, she said, out of respect for the experiences we shared in Karida, but you should have known this couldn't happen. Did you really think I would marry a Disenka orphan? A boy who grew up on the street? Robin twitched. Don't, he said very quietly. Don't do that. Do what? Misaki snapped. Tell the truth. Try to protect me. Protect you. Misaki scoffed, trying to conceal the way his gentle words shook her. I'm trying to get you to leave, you're trying to hurt me, he said, so I can leave you here without any guilt. Her jaw clenched. I know your tactics, Misaki. They won't work on me. His voice had gotten so tender, so unbearably understanding, and I know yours, she said sharply. Don't use that voice on me. I'm not a crazy person with a machete to someone's neck. But she might as well have been. The tension and frantic, impotent fury between them could have rivaled any hostage situation. You're the one who traveled all this way to barge in where you weren't invited. If anyone needs talking down, it's you. You didn't respond to any of my messages. Misaki hesitated for a moment in confusion. She had never gotten any messages. Why? Had her husband or father-in-law been intercepting them? Would they really? No. It didn't matter. She wouldn't have responded anyway. Did you ever consider, she said, that I just didn't feel like talking to you? She had thought she could avoid upsetting anyone. If she did as her father said, and then just never had any contact with Robin again, her old friend would forget about her, move on, and she would never have to confront him. Damn Robin for ruining that. Damn him. I just need to understand, he said. I need you to be honest with me. Is this what you want? Misaki drew herself up, employing the posture she had learned to tower over taller Theonites. It is, she said, voice icy. She didn't feel tall. I don't believe you. His gentle tone sent a spike of rage through Misaki. Her fists clenched. How dare you? What? How dare you claim to respect my choices and then deny them because you don't agree with them? How dare you claim to respect my autonomy and then deny it because it means you don't get to keep me? That's not what which is it, Thundiel? Do you respect my decisions or not? I do, Robin insisted, his own voice rising. You know that, Misaki. That's why I'm worried about you. This. He gestured vaguely around him, from Misaki's restrictive kimono to the rest of the quiet little village and the frigid mountains surrounding it. This doesn't seem like something you would have chosen of your own free will. Well, it is, Misaki said stubbornly, and damn it, why were there tears pressing at the back of her throat? Why had Robin come here? Why was he doing this to her? Maybe you don't know me as well as you think. But you presume to understand me because we went to school together for a few years. She hardened herself against the tears. Who do you think you are? Your friend, Robin said earnestly, and Nami, damn it, Misaki had never seen so much pain in his piercing black eyes. We didn't just go to school together. We fought together, learned together, saved each other's lives. I'm a daughter of the Tsusano house. Misaki's voice rose, and she struggled to keep it under control. You assume your uncivilized little alleyway brawls were ever more than a hobby to me? You really expected me to stay there, in that dirty, Aden-ridden city. That struck a nerve, sending the first flicker of genuine anger through Robin's expression. Don't say that. I'm sorry, she said placidly, pressing her advantage, even as something in her screamed. I thought you wanted honesty, but clearly, you don't understand, then explain it to me, Robin said, his voice simultaneously pleading and forceful. Honestly. Because it looks an awful lot like a forced marriage. But Misaki couldn't explain honestly. To do so, she would have to admit that she still loved him. And she couldn't do that. Not to him. Not to herself. Not to anyone. Zero, Misaki, I knew you loved your family. I didn't think you were a coward. Oh, is that what I am? I made a decision you don't like, so I'm a coward. This isn't about me. Robin burst out. You don't have to marry me if you don't want to. You don't have to come back to Karida or ever see me again if you don't want to. But please, you can't stay here. As your friend, I can't let you. Misaki didn't recoil as Robin took her arm and tugged. She did, however, flinch at the wave of Nyama that swept onto the front deck a moment later. Takaru. Misaki, her husband said, appearing at her shoulder in a wall of solid cold. What is going on here? Who is this person? Oh. Misaki yanked her arm free, looking from Takaru to Robin in panic. This is, Robin's hands curled into fists. He was glaring at Takaru with a blazing fury he usually reserved for murderers, and Misaki realized that he must have noticed her flinch and inferred the worst. Gods, why had she flinched? Why? Takaru's Jia had crushed the temperature down to a shivering degree. He and Robin didn't speak the same language, but the glares they exchanged needed no translation. Both said plainly that someone was about to die. Wait. Misaki started weakly, but she had no idea what to say. What was she supposed to do in this situation? Robin was doing a good job not trembling under the force of the cold, but Misaki could see on his face that it had him disconcerted. Theonites as powerful as Robin were not used to having their Nyama completely overwhelmed by another. So, you're Misaki's husband, huh? Robin switched to Yamaninc, though it was unlikely to do much good. Yamaninc instruction in rural Kaigen was not good enough to produce fluent speakers. What are you, like, twice her age? Takaru took a step forward and sparks crackled at Robin's fingertips. He wouldn't win. Robin was a handy street fighter, far better than a self-taught orphan had any business being. His natural grace and his above-average teia made him unstoppable to the untrained, low-powered criminals of Livingston, but this wasn't Karitha. This was the seat of a power that had guarded an empire for years. Robin's mix of critical thinking and inexhaustible willpower were good for fumbling through a fight with a stronger Theonite, but Takaru was a caliber of fighter Robin had never encountered before. A direct clash with the Matsuda, here among so much ice and snow, would be a death sentence. Robin, don't, Misaki warned in Lindish. You're no match for him. Is that why you're staying here? Robin demanded, looking disgusted. Because you're afraid of him? The look on his face spelled disaster. He was ready to beat someone bloody, but Takaru wouldn't go down like a Livingston brawler or machete fighter. He would kill Robin if it came to it. Tell this man he isn't welcome here, Takaru said. He should leave before he finds his head separated from his body. The words chilled Misaki. She tried not to look frightened as she translated them to Lindish for Robin. You're afraid of him, Robin said. I can't leave you here. Misaki's mind reeled. There was now a very real threat to Robin's safety. She wouldn't convince him to back down by telling him that Takaru was too strong. She had to employ a different tactic. Stay calm, Misaki. Stay calm. Lifting her chin, she adopted the most scathing tone she could manage. Really, Robin? You honestly think I'm stupid enough to marry someone who might hurt me? Since you apparently need this spelled out for you, my husband is trying to protect me from a raving lunatic who showed up out of nowhere to harass me. Robin's darkly glowing eyes, like live coals, flicked between her and Takaru. She knew that look. When he was searching for the right thing to do. Not the easy thing, but the right one. For the moment, he seemed stumped, but Robin always did the right thing, no matter how hard it was. That was why Misaki had always followed him, why she loved him. You are not welcome here, outsider, Takaru said again, and this time Robin could not miss the meaning. This is your last chance to leave unharmed. Robin seemed uncertain. Misaki, I'm not leaving without you. Takaru took another step forward. The air grew colder. Robin shifted into a fighting stance. No. Before she could stop herself, Misaki had grabbed the wrist of Takaru's sword hand, disrupting his Jia before the fabled whispering blade could form in his fingers. Her new husband, still such a stranger, looked down at her in mild surprise. He's just a boy, she scrambled to explain. He's not right in the head. It wouldn't be right for you to kill him, Takaru-sama. Please. I don't want you to have that on your conscience. Matsuda Takaru stared down at her, his expression unreadable. Can you compel the madman to leave you alone then? Yes, sir. Misaki leveled a frigid glare at Robin, her best friend, the only person she had ever wanted. My husband is understandably concerned for my safety, but he has generously agreed not to kill you if you leave immediately and never show your face here again. Robin still hesitated, so she made her voice ice. If you really don't respect my decision, then go ahead. Fight him. Die. Robin's flames flickered his uncertainty. His wide eyes reflected confusion and betrayal, but Misaki had seen him fight his way through worse than that. Against all the odds, he always fought. He always did the right thing. The flames between his fingers guttered and went out as he lowered his gaze. If this is really what you want. It is, Misaki said through her teeth. Then I'm sorry I disturbed you. Head down, Robin turned and walked away. Beside Misaki, Takeru's Jia eased back, the frigid bite receding from the water molecules around him. But Misaki found everything in her suddenly straining, frantic. Robin was walking away? Robin was walking away. Misaki opened her mouth to call after him, come back. Come back. Please, Robin. Take me with you. But no sound came out. The breath had frozen in her chest. Takeru's hand closed on her arm. Come, Misaki. You should be inside, where it is safe. She was numb, unable to resist as the cold creature she had married pulled her into the Matsuda compound and shut the doors. Why did he walk away? An agonized voice screamed through Misaki. He's Robin. Robin saves everyone. Robin never leaves a friend behind. Why did he walk away? But the smothered, honest part of her knew the truth. He was just a boy. For all his abilities and accomplishments and superhuman spirit, Robin Thundiel was only 19. He had been out of his element, in a culture he didn't understand, caught between people older and, he mistakenly thought, smarter than himself. By all accounts, he had done the right thing, the only thing he could do when she looked him in the eye and told him to leave. Robin had always deferred to her when it came to matters of protocol, politics, and people. Why had she expected him to magically grasp things she barely understood herself? Why had she expected him to read her and react like a man? The answer lurked, unwelcome, because you're too afraid to do it yourself. You are a coward, Misaki. If she wasn't woman enough to fight her own battles, then what right did she have to Robin's help? How could she expect him to save her when she wasn't willing to lift a finger to save herself? What had she thought Robin was going to do anyway? Fight the whispering blades and the rest of the mountain and then whisk her away? That wasn't within his ability. He had never had any power to change this situation, only she had. And she had been too weak to make it happen. A coward like her had no right to someone like Robin, no right to the future she had let herself imagine with him. Still, she crumpled in on herself and wept for it. Loud sobs would have disrupted the silence, drawing the attention of the men of the Matsuda house, so she smothered the sounds in her long sleeves. Takeru found her there a wadi later, curled up in the middle of the bedroom, shaking. Misaki, his usually frigid voice had taken on a note of worry. Are you well? Yes. Hiding her face, Misaki forced her tears into water vapor and willed herself to stop trembling. Yes, Takeru-sama. It was not until the next day that Misaki found the bag Robin had left her, tucked into a corner of the front deck. It contained only one thing, the sword that had been her companion through all their adventures, one last plea to remember everything they had had together. She had knelt, holding Shadow's daughter for a long time, fingers playing over the Zilizan glass handle. Tusama said that there were better and more beautiful things than the rush of battle. You'll understand when you have children. It would be worth it when she had children. Tusama had promised.